They say necessity is the mother of invention, but history has proven something stranger. Sometimes it is curiosity, obsession, or pure eccentricity that gives birth to the most unexpected creations, hidden in dusty archives and forgotten workshops or inventions that seem bizarre by today's standards, yet in their time, they were considered breakthroughs. Imagine walking into a 16th century Venetian square and seeing a man wearing an enormous leather suit with glass lenses, stepping into the sea like a creature from a dream. This was not fantasy. It was an early diving suit, crafted long before modern submarines. Designed by Giovanni da Fontana. Its purpose was simple, to let a man walk beneath the water as surface, but its appearance was something between a medieval knight and a sea monster, while others marveled at the concept. The locals whispered about sorcery, yet the seed had been planted. Without such crude beginnings, modern deep-sea exploration might never have been possible. Travel further back to ancient Greece, and you will find a device so unusual that even scholars debated whether it truly existed, the Ellipoli. Invented by Hero of Alexandria, it was essentially a steam-powered sphere that rotated when heated. In other words, a steam engine nearly 2,000 years before the Industrial Revolution. But Hero never used it to power carts or boats. To him, it was a temple curiosity, a way to amaze worshippers by spinning metallic orbs through divine heat, a marvel of physics hidden behind the curtain of religion. Centuries later, in the frozen courts of 17th century Russia, Tsar Peter the Great took fascination with Western engineering to peculiar extremes. Among his imported gadgets was a mechanical peacock, a clockwork automaton with feathers of gold and silver that could fan its tail, strut, and sing. While it served no purpose beyond entertainment, it symbolized the ruler's hunger for progress, even if progress sometimes came dressed as vanity. But not every invention stayed harmless. In the late 19th century, the streets of Paris saw the rise of the pigeon camera, tiny analog cameras strapped to the chests of trained pigeons, clicking aerial photographs as the birds flew over the city. Invented by German apothecary Julius Neubrunner, it began as a novelty, charming glimpses of rooftops and gardens. But military officers quickly recognized its potential for reconnaissance. What began as a playful curiosity became a tool of espionage. If we step into the Victorian era, the line between science and spectacle becomes thinner still. One striking example, the safety coffin. In a time when fear of premature burial ran rampant, inventors proposed elaborate systems to let the supposedly dead signal for rescue, bells attached to strings in the coffin, breathing tubes extending to the surface. Some designs even included small ladders to climb out. Few were ever used successfully, but the existence of such inventions reveals the depth of human dread and the creativity born from it. Then there was the curious case of the Parisian umbrella with a gun. On the surface, it was simply an elegant walking accessory, but with a hidden trigger mechanism in its handle, it could fire a small bullet or dart through the tip. This invention balanced on the edge of fashion and lethality, the kind of creation that could only emerge from a society obsessed with refinement yet familiar with danger. In Japan's Edo period, inventors pursued a different sort of unusual automata known as karakuri nenyu. These wooden dolls, powered by clockwork and weights, could serve tea, draw, bow, or dance. They were not toys but engineering achievements, blending art with mechanics. Each movement was deliberate, each gesture a calculated product of gears and pulleys hidden beneath silk robes. While Europe marveled at similar creations, Japan gave them souls through craftsmanship. The early 20th century saw perhaps one of the strangest transportation concepts, the monowheel, a single giant wheel with the driver seated inside, pedaling or using a small motor to propel it forward. It promised efficiency but delivered instability. Riders described the sensation as both exhilarating and terrifying. And accidents were frequent, yet photographs of these towering wheels still capture the spirit of an age willing to experiment with almost anything on the road. Some inventions were so ahead of their time that they seemed almost alien. Take, for instance, the 1930s portable radio hat. Designed in the United States, it was exactly what it sounds like. A stylish fedora with a functioning AM radio built inside, a small antenna poked from the brim, and the wearer could listen privately while walking. It never caught on widely, partly because it was heavy and awkward, but the concept foreshadowed the headphones and wearable tech of today. Perhaps the most poetic of unusual inventions came from the Renaissance polymath Leonardo da Vinci. Among his countless sketches lies the design for a mechanical knight, an armored figure, capable of sitting, standing, moving its arms, and lifting its visor. It was never mass-produced, but modern reconstructions have proven it would have worked. Imagine, in the late 1400s, a courtly gathering where a steel-clad figure moved on its own. The boundaries between man-machine and myth dissolving. The pattern is clear. History is littered with creations that defy convention, sometimes practical, sometimes absurd, but always revealing something about the people and cultures that made them. Behind each invention lies a story, not just of engineering, but of imagination unbound by the limits of the era. And in the next chapter, we will journey deeper into the archives, where forgotten machines and strange contraptions tell tales stranger than fiction, and where the line between genius and folly becomes nearly invisible. The deeper we go into the annals of history, the stranger the inventions become, each one a reflection of human audacity, fear, or sheer whimsy. Take, for instance, the Victorian-era flying bicycle. At a time when the dream of human flight consumed inventors across Europe, a British engineer designed a contraption that combined a standard pedal bicycle with massive canvas wings. The rider would pedal furiously down a hill, gaining momentum before attempting to take off. Predictably, most flights ended in painful crashes. But photographs from the time capture the unwavering optimism in the faces of these early aviators, convinced they were moments away from soaring like birds. Across the Atlantic, in the early 1900s, another inventor pushed the limits of personal transportation, the amphibious bicycle. This was no ordinary bike, but one mounted on hollow pontoons, allowing the rider to pedal across lakes and rivers. While it technically worked, steering was nearly impossible, and wind or currents often carried riders far from their intended path. Newspapers of the time covered these experiments with both amusement and awe, noting how such devices hinted at a future where roads might become optional. In the 18th century, Benjamin Franklin, a man renowned for practical genius, dabbled in what could be called delightful impracticality, the glass harmonica. This musical instrument used a series of glass bowls of different sizes mounted on a spindle, which rotated in a shallow trough of water. The player touched the rims with wet fingers, producing ethereal, haunting tones. Marie Antoinette learned to play it, Mozart composed for it. But rumors soon spread that its music could drive listeners mad or cause fainting spells. The harmonica faded from popularity, but its legacy remains one of the most haunting sounds ever invented. In 1902, the Paris Exposition became a showcase for another oddity, the rolling bridge. Instead of swinging or lifting, the bridge curled itself up like a caterpillar to allow boats to pass. The engineering was impressive, but the maintenance costs and complexity made it impractical for widespread use. Still, it embodied the early 20th century's hunger for mechanical novelty. When cities competed to outdo each other with imaginative infrastructure, some inventions came not from grand laboratories, but from humble desperation. During World War I, soldiers in the trenches created improvised devices like the periscope rifle, a bolt-action rifle fitted with a mirror system, allowing a soldier to aim and fire without exposing his head above the parapet. Crude but effective, it saved lives in the brutal stalemate of trench warfare. While not glamorous, it was a reminder that necessity can breed brilliance even in the most hellish conditions. The 1930s brought the bizarre dream of flying platforms, small, personal aircraft resembling oversized drones. With the operator standing atop the engine, these platforms could hover and maneuver in any direction, and the U.S. military briefly experimented with them. The problem, stability. A sudden gust of wind could send both operator and machine tumbling uncontrollably. They were thrilling, but far too dangerous for practical use. Even the culinary world has had its share of oddities. In 1936, a U.S. patent was filed for an automatic spaghetti twirling fork, complete with a spring-driven mechanism to wind pasta onto the utensil. It promised to save diners the effort of twirling spaghetti by hand, but in practice, it tangled noodles messily and occasionally sprayed sauce onto unfortunate users. Still, it foreshadowed the era of novelty kitchen gadgets that would flood households decades later. The 1960s. The fashion industry took a futuristic leap with the bubble helmet, not a space helmet, but a transparent acrylic dome worn in public to protect the wearer from smog, rain, and noise. Equipped with a small ventilation system, it was marketed as a stylish, modern solution for urban living. While it never caught on, photographs of chic models strolling city streets in their personal bubbles feel strangely prophetic in an age of pandemic masks and air purifiers. Perhaps one of the strangest inventions ever deployed was the bat bomb of World War II. Conceived by the United States, it involved strapping small incendiary devices to bats, releasing them over Japanese cities at dawn, and letting them roost in buildings before detonating. The concept was both ingenious and horrifying, using nature's instincts as a weapon. The project was tested but ultimately abandoned in favor of other weapons, leaving it as one of the most unsettling chapters in military invention history. Then there is the matter of inventions that never truly worked, yet fascinated the public. Charles Redheffer's perpetual motion machine in the early 19th century promised limitless energy without fuel. Crowds gathered to witness the marvel until a suspicious engineer discovered it was secretly powered by a hidden crank turned by a man in another room, fraudulent or not. It revealed humanity's endless yearning for a miracle technology that could rewrite the rules of the world. From music that could drive you mad to bicycles that could cross lakes, from bat-delivered bombs to bubble helmets. The catalog of human invention is as unpredictable as the minds that dreamed them up. And yet, as odd as these creations seem, they are stepping stones, each one a tiny experiment in bending reality, in reshaping the human experience. In the next part, we will travel to the very edges of plausibility, where inventions flirt with the absurd, the dangerous, and the visionary all at once, and where the boundary between science fiction and history begins to dissolve. Some inventions are born from necessity, others from curiosity, but there is a third category, the kind that seems to come straight from the mind of a dreamer, unbound by reason. These are the inventions that make us wonder, was this genius, madness, or both? One of the most bizarre yet oddly practical ideas emerged in the 1920s from Russian engineer Vladimir Tatlin, the Tatlin, a human-powered flying machine shaped like a giant bird. Part sculpture, part aircraft, it was inspired by the flight of cranes and designed to be operated by a single person pedaling wings. It never achieved sustained flight, but in its skeletal wooden frame lay the vision of a man who believed humans could rise into the sky not with engines, but with muscle and rhythm. If we move to the early Cold War era, we encounter the American nuclear-powered airplane. The concept was straightforward in theory and terrifying in practice. A bomber with a small nuclear reactor inboard, capable of staying airborne for days without refueling. Engineers built prototypes and even tested shielding systems to protect the crew from radiation. But the risk of a nuclear crash was too great. The project was scrapped, leaving behind eerie photographs of skeletal aircraft shells and reactors that never flew. Then there's the curious invention of the cat piano, a cruel device attributed to 17th century European pranksters or experimental musicians. It allegedly involved lining up cats in a box so their tails extended under a keyboard. Pressing a key would pinch the tail, producing a meow of a specific pitch. While historians debate whether it was ever built, the fact that it was conceived and possibly demonstrated to amuse royalty is a testament to the strange intersection of art, cruelty, and spectacle in earlier centuries. In the 1960s, another invention took to the water. The aqua scooter, a motorized device that allowed swimmers to glide just beneath the surface, pulled along like a human torpedo. It was marketed as a recreational toy, but militaries quickly adapted similar concepts for stealthy diver operations. Recreational models faded from the market, replaced by sleeker versions used by special forces around the world. Some of the strangest devices were aimed at solving problems that barely existed. In 1931, an American inventor patented the anti-bandit suitcase, designed for bank couriers. If attacked, the user could press a hidden button, causing the suitcase to drop its contents while simultaneously firing tear gas into the face of the would-be thief. Effective? Possibly. Overly dramatic? Absolutely. Few were ever sold. But the idea hinted at a time when even carrying cash could inspire gadgetry worthy of a spy film in Japan's 1980s boom years. Consumer tech reached a playful absurdity with inventions like the sleeping face supporter. This was a plastic frame worn like a headset, designed to hold the user's chin so they could nap while sitting without slumping forward. Marketed to office workers riding crowded trains. It was just one of countless small innovations reflecting Japan's ability to turn even minor inconveniences into engineering challenges. But history also gives us examples of inventions that teetered between brilliance and catastrophe, like the 19th century torpedo ram. This was a warship designed to both fire explosive torpedoes and ram enemy vessels head-on at high speed. Naval theorists believed this combination would dominate future battles. In practice, ramming often damaged the attacker as much as the target, and the concept was quietly abandoned after several disastrous trials. The realm of personal transportation saw perhaps its most whimsical creation in the form of the walking bicycle. Invented in the late 20th century, it replaced wheels with mechanical legs, allowing the rider to walk across uneven terrain. While fascinating to watch, it was slow, noisy, and exhausting to pedal. Yet it captured imaginations because it blurred the line between machine and living creature. Sometimes the unusual invention wasn't meant for practicality at all, but for pure spectacle. In 1901, French engineer Louis Brennan demonstrated his gyroscopic monorail, a train that balanced on a single rail stabilized by giant spinning gyroscopes. It could lean dramatically into turns without tipping over, carrying passengers smoothly along. The crowds were astonished, but the cost and complexity doomed it to obscurity. Still, the photographs of elegantly dressed passengers riding a train that seemed to defy gravity remain. Some of the most striking images of early 20th century invention. Perhaps the strangest part of studying these odd inventions is realizing how many of them predicted the future. The radio hat foreshadowed Bluetooth headphones. The bubble helmet anticipated modern air filter masks. Even bat bombs, in their grim way, hinted at the use of autonomous airborne systems for targeted strikes. What once looked ridiculous can, with time, appear visionary. And so history's collection of unusual inventions is more than a cabinet of curiosities. It is a mirror reflecting humanity's restless urge to create, to test boundaries, to imagine beyond the ordinary, whether practical or absurd, harmless or dangerous. These inventions remind us that progress is not a straight path, but a winding road, littered with failures, eccentricities, and flashes of impossible genius. Somewhere, even now, in a workshop or garage, someone is building the next strange device that will puzzle or delight the world 100 years from now. And when we look back, we may realize that what seemed unusual was simply the first step toward something extraordinary.
The sea is calm, too calm, beneath the mirror-like surface of the Arctic waters, as shadow stirs a shadow the size of a skyscraper lying on its side. It moves slowly, deliberately, pushing millions of gallons of seawater aside with a deep, low vibration that you cannot hear, but you can feel. This is no ordinary submarine. This is the largest ever built by human hands, a floating fortress forged in the heart of the Cold War, the Typhoon class, the Kula, the very embodiment of power and fear. And tonight, it is going to war. The orders came in silence, transmitted through encrypted bursts from Moscow's Naval Command. They were simple and chilling: deploy, remain undetected, and prepare strike capabilities. Somewhere, thousands of kilometers away, an enemy task force was mobilizing. The world above was blissfully unaware. Politicians spoke of diplomacy, markets fluctuated. People went about their daily lives, but below, in the freezing darkness, the countdown to confrontation had already begun. The Typhoon was not just a submarine. It was a city beneath the waves. Two nuclear reactors pulsed within its steel heart, driving massive propellers that could carry it across oceans without surfacing for months. It housed ballistic missiles capable of leveling entire cities. Inside, a crew of more than 160 men lived and worked in a labyrinth of corridors, control rooms, and weapon bays. For them, The submarine was not just a war machine, it was home. Every sound, every vibration, every shift in pressure meant something. The hull creaked like an ancient leviathan under the weight of the sea. And yet, it was built to withstand the unimaginable. When the Typhoon left port, it was a silent event. No journalists, no crowds, just a handful of naval officers saluting as the massive vessel slipped beneath the waves. Once submerged, she vanished completely from human sight. Only a handful of satellites and sonar buoys might catch a fleeting glimpse of her. But by the time they did, she would already be gone. Her mission had begun. Life inside was a strange blend of monotony and tension. Days blurred together under artificial light. Meals were eaten in cramped mess halls. Men slept in narrow bunks stacked like coffins. Rocked gently by the ocean's motion, the air was filtered, recycled, tasting faintly metallic. The temperature was kept constant, the humidity carefully controlled, but no one ever forgot they were encased in a steel shell, hundreds of meters beneath crushing seawater. Every man aboard knew that if the hull was breached, death would come in seconds. And yet, there was no fear, only focus. The captain, a man forged from decades of naval service, commanded with quiet authority. His eyes never left the tactical displays. His voice was calm, even when issuing orders that could alter the course of history. Around him, officers monitored sonar readings, tracking distant contacts, merchant ships, fishing boats, enemy destroyers. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of human eyes, the enemy submarines prowled too. The ocean was a chessboard, and the Typhoon was the queen. Suddenly, a blip appeared on sonar. Faint. Moving. Not civilian. The sonar operator adjusted the gain, narrowing the range. The contact was at extreme distance, but growing closer. The captain's hand tightened around the edge of the console. It could be an American Los Angeles-class submarine, fast, quiet, lethal. If so, it was hunting them. And a hunter that big does not miss by accident. The Typhoon changed course with subtle maneuver, designed to blend into thermal layers of water. These invisible currents masked sonar signatures, making detection far harder. The crew moved with precision, each man knowing his role. Lights dimmed, conversation stopped. The submarine became a ghost. Above them, storms brewed. Waves crashed in the Arctic night. But the Typhoon didn't care. At a depth of 300 meters, the chaos above was nothing but a faint whisper. Here, the real battle was one of silence and patience. The sonar ping came sharp, metallic, unmistakable. The enemy had found them. The captain didn't flinch, maintained depth, ready countermeasures. The crew's hands moved over switches, arming devices designed to confuse and mislead noisemakers, decoys, bursts of sound that could imitate the Typhoon's acoustic signature. The ocean was about to become a battlefield, somewhere in the darkness. Another giant was out there, a smaller, perhaps faster, but just as deadly. The question now was simple: who would strike first? The Typhoon's missile silos were locked, cold, waiting. Nuclear warheads slept inside, their destructive potential beyond imagination. The order to fire had not been given yet. But the crew knew that if diplomacy failed above, the captain would not hesitate. The ping came again, closer, louder. The hunter was closing in. The captain gave the order, silent running, all non-essential systems off. Instantly, the Typhoon became a shadow. Pumps slowed, lights dimmed to red. Every man aboard controlled his breathing, aware that even the smallest sound could carry through water for miles. Hours passed. Contact remained. Then, without warning, the ping stopped. Silence returned. The enemy had either broken off, or was now shadowing them silently. The crew waited. Every second felt like an hour. Above, the political situation was shifting. Reports came through encrypted channels. Tensions were rising. Fleets were mobilizing. Governments were accusing. The ocean was no longer neutral territory, it was the front line. The Typhoon's captain stared at the map, a thin red line marking their course. Ahead lay a choke point, a narrow passage between underwater ridges. Beyond it was open ocean, and their target area. If they could pass undetected, they could position themselves for a strike. But if the enemy was waiting on the other side, it could be the end. The order came down from Moscow, clear and final, proceed. The Typhoon turned toward the choke point. The largest submarine in the world was about to test the limits of stealth and endurance. The ocean held its breath. And then, something appeared in the blackness ahead. The black shape ahead was motionless. At first, the sonar operator thought it was an underwater ridge, but then it moved slowly, deliberately adjusting its angle. Not a rock, not debris. A submarine, and it was directly in their path. The Typhoon's captain studied the faint, green-lit display. The contact's noise profile was unmistakable. NATO. Possibly a British Astute class, quieter than anything Russia had faced in decades. The worst kind of opponent in confined waters. The crew understood what this meant. In a narrow choke point, there was no room to maneuver, no space to hide in the thermal layers. If the enemy wanted to force an engagement, this was the place to do it. The captain spoke softly, his voice carrying the weight of experience. Helm 1/3 speed, weapons ready, but hold. The order was not to attack, yet, in submarine warfare. The first to fire often revealed their position, and in these waters, exposure meant death. Minutes dragged on. The enemy contact held position like a spider in a web. The Typhoon moved forward, inch by inch. Every man aboard could feel the tension. Even the massive bulk of the submarine seemed to hesitate, as though sensing the danger ahead. Then, the passive sonar picked it up with a faint click of an enemy periscope rising above the waves somewhere behind them. A second contact. They were in a trap. The captain made his decision. Deploy decoys. Right full rudder. Dive 350 meters. The Typhoon's massive hull groaned as it descended deeper, the pressure building around them. Countermeasure pods fired from the launch tubes, releasing noisemakers and false signatures into the water. The sonar operator watched as the enemy's attention shifted toward the decoys. For a moment, they were free, but the relief was short-lived. A sudden, sharp sound cut through the water of the high-speed screw of a torpedo. Bearing 265, torpedo inbound, alarms blared. The crew snapped into action. The Typhoon's size made it powerful, but not nimble. It would take skill and timing to evade. The captain ordered an emergency turn, banking the massive submarine hard to starboard. The inertial forces pushed men against the walls. The sea itself seemed to resist their movements. The torpedo closed in 800 meters, 600, 400, another decoy launched, its acoustic lure drawing the weapon off course. A second later, the sonar registered a detonation, a muffled, bone-deep boom that shook the hull. The decoy was gone, but the Typhoon was still alive. The captain knew the enemy would not stop. NATO doctrine was clear. Neutralize strategic missile subs before they could reach launch position. They would keep coming, wave after wave, until either the Typhoon was sunk, or it was in position to strike back. Ours turned into a brutal game of cat and mouse. The Typhoon used every trick in the book of diving into deep trenches, hiding in the shadow of underwater mountains, drifting silently for hours at a time. Each time they thought they had shaken their pursuers, the sonar would pick up that familiar, distant hum. The enemy was relentless. Inside, the crew was running on adrenaline and rationed sleep. Coffee cups clinked quietly in the control room, then whispered instead of speaking, as if the ocean itself could overhear them. There was no laughter, no conversation about home, only the mission. Then came the signal. It was a short burst transmission from Moscow, heavily encrypted, but its meaning was unmistakable. Satellite surveillance had detected an American carrier strike group advancing toward Russian territorial waters. Orders moved to intercept position and prepare for a demonstration strike if necessary. A demonstration strike. The term was bureaucratic, almost harmless sounding. In reality, it meant a nuclear launch designed not to destroy, but to warn, a single missile aimed at an uninhabited target area. A message to the enemy: stop, or the next one will be a city. The captain stared at the transmission for a long moment. Then he ordered a new course. The Typhoon's nuclear payload would soon be within range. But the enemy knew it too. The NATO sub shadowing them accelerated, closing the distance. Its captain understood the stakes. If the Typhoon crossed a certain line, there would be no going back. In the crew quarters, men checked their gear, adjusted their headsets, and sat in silence. A few scribbled short notes, letters that might never be sent. In the galley, the cook served what might be their last hot meal. Nobody finished it. The final approach to launch position was the most dangerous part of the mission. The Typhoon surfaced briefly in the dead of night to receive final target coordinates via satellite. The Arctic wind howled across the deck. Sheets of ice cracked under the weight of the rising hull. The moment the antenna retracted and they submerged again, the sonar lit up with hostile pings. The trap was closing. Two enemy subs now, one ahead, one behind. The captain's voice was calm but firm. Arm tubes 1 through 4. Load our 3-9 missiles. Deep inside the Typhoon, massive hydraulic systems moved with mechanical precision, raising missile hatches that had not been opened in years. The crew worked in near darkness, lit only by red battle lamps. Every clank of metal, every hiss of hydraulics, felt like a drumbeat in the lead-up to war. The countdown began. 10 minutes to firing readiness. And then, another torpedo alert. This time, 2. Coming from different bearings, the ocean exploded into chaos. The first torpedo was coming in fast, its propeller scream cutting through the ocean like a buzzsaw in the dark. The second was slower, but angled perfectly to catch the Typhoon in a crossfire. The sonar operator's voice was tight, impact in 90 seconds. Both of them. The captain didn't blink. Evasive, hard to port. Prepare countermeasures. Flood port ballast, a dive now. The Typhoon lurched violently, its massive bulk groaning as the crew fought to keep balance. In the missile compartment, men braced against the bulkheads as the steel giant sank deeper. Faster than was safe. The temperature dropped sharply. Ice water pressed against the hull with crushing force. At the same time, two countermeasure pods launched, spewing streams of bubbles and noise into the blackness. One torpedo veered toward the decoy. The other kept coming. 50 meters. 30. The operator's voice cracked. The captain's eyes narrowed. Blow ballast. Now, in an instant, compressed air roared into the ballast tanks. The Typhoon surged upward like a breaching whale, forcing the second torpedo to overshoot and detonate harmlessly in the depths below. The explosion rattled the hull, lights flickered. But the submarine held together. No one cheered. They all knew this was temporary. The enemy subs would reload. More weapons were coming. The captain glanced at the clock. 4 minutes to missile readiness. If they could hold position just that long, the Typhoon could complete its mission. But holding position meant being the sitting target. The crew worked like men possessed. In the missile control room, hands flew over consoles. Red lights blinked in sequence. Hydraulic locks released. The launch hatches groaned open. Deep above, in the Arctic night, 6 massive missile lids swung wide like the gills of a mechanical leviathan. And then, a sound no submariner ever wants to hear. A third contact. This one, bigger, louder, closer. The sonar profile was unmistakable. A surface ship. Not just any ship, NATO. Destroyer, dropping into the choke point at flank speed. And destroyers meant one thing: active sonar pings and depth charges. The first ping rolled through the water like a thunderclap. A second followed. They were locked on. The captain had seconds to decide: complete the launch sequence and risk being destroyed mid-fire, or dive, evade, and abandon the mission. He thought of the orders from Moscow. The demonstration strike was meant to show resolve, but resolve meant nothing if the submarine was gone. He thought of his crew, men who had trained for years, who had families waiting. And he thought of the enemy, just meters away in the black water. Then, just like his own, the captain made his decision. All hands are prepare for deep dive. Secure missile hatches. Abort launch. Gasps filled the control room. But no one protested. Orders were orders. The Typhoon's reactors surged, driving the giant downward at maximum safe descent. Sonar lit up with the splash of depth charges. 1, 2, 3 detonating in rapid succession above them. Each blast shook the hull like an earthquake. Metal groaned. Bolts rattled in their housings. The Typhoon pressed deeper. The destroyer circled overhead, but the Typhoon was gone, sliding into a deep trench where no sonar could easily reach. The enemy subs followed, but cautiously. They knew the trench was a labyrinth of ridges and cliffs. One wrong turn, and a steel coffin awaited them too. For 3 hours, the Typhoon drifted silently. No engines, no pumps, no sound except the creak of cooling steel. The crew sat in darkness, every man listening for the distant hum of an enemy screw. Eventually, the pings grew faint, then faded entirely. The captain waited another full hour before ordering ascent. The Typhoon rose slowly, breaking into the mid-depth currents that would carry them away from the combat zone. When they finally received a new transmission from Moscow, the orders had changed. The crisis above had been diffused. The carrier group had altered course. The demonstration strike was no longer needed. In the mess hall, the crew ate in silence. Some men smiled faintly. Others stared at their plates. They had not fired a shot, and yet they had been seconds from starting a war. As the Typhoon turned for home, the captain stood alone in the control room, hands clasped behind his back. The sea outside was calm again. But in the depths, he knew, the hunt never truly stopped. Somewhere out there, another submarine enemy or allied was listening, waiting. The largest submarine in the world had gone to war, and returned without glory, without headlines, without recognition. And that was exactly how it was meant to be, because in the silent war, beneath the waves, survival itself is victory.